God makes saints. There are a lot of saints we don't know about. Certain ones God reveals to the world, others He doesn't. And when the church proclaims someone a saint, is that what the church is saying is that this person has special grace from God, where he can, intercede for us, but most importantly is that this person can serve as an example for us.
I was born October the 5th, 1947 at 11:55 p.m. Prior to this, my mother was Catholic. My mother was dying of typhus fever in Shanghai. Archbishop John used to visit hospitals on a daily basis, and he read what patients were in the hospital, specifically looking for Russian names. My mother was literally on her deathbed, and Archbishop John came to a Catholic person, not Orthodox, and prayed with my mother, and the next morning my mother got up and walked out of the hospital on their own. The doctors and nurses had said my mother was going to die tomorrow morning.
My wife got sick about a little bit over 3 years ago with colon cancer. And in fact, we were supposed to go on a trip to Shanghai. We canceled that immediately. And first thing we did was serve a moleben in front of Bishop John's relics. And 3 days later, she had the operation. The operation was successful. And it's been 3 years, going on the 4th now, and everything is fine.
В сентябре 1993 года мой сын Всеволод заболел, что-то было необычное, мы обратились к доктору, доктор послал на особые исследования, и оказалось, что у него нефрит.
I think it was, I forgot in which convent, one of the doctor, they was operating on the abbess or the priest over there. And then when they finished the operation, the chief surgeon told the abbess, he says, hey, you should keep your monks out of the operation room. Abbess, nobody's in there. Oh yes, that one. Point out the little young's picture. That one, he was inside the operation room.
You know, people ask if miracles do occur, they do.
Сыну было меньше 2 лет, и эта болезнь вообще, когда бывает, появляется где-то в возрасте 4 лет. Это было необычно и довольно сильно высказывалось. Ему начали давать довольно сильные лекарства, и лекарства никак не помогали. В это время моя супруга услыхала, что как будто собираются открывать мощи святителя Иоанна. Но это только шли слухи. Мы получили эти слухи с западного побережья, но мы здесь ничего не слыхали. Матушка меня попросила, позвони владыке Антонию и спроси, что происходит. Я позвонил владыке Антонию, владыка Антоний говорит, ничего такого мы не слыхали, ничего такого здесь нет, не происходит.
I was just talking to her and she noticed something, a bump. It didn't look right. And of course I went to the mirror and looked and it was quite large and scared me, of course. And I called Sergey on the phone and told him that something's wrong, which is my husband. And told him that I need to get this looked at right away. Monday I went. First thing I did, of course, was put ioan oil on it.
Я помню, это было воскресенье, уже в октябре. Лекарства все еще не помогают, дают сыну, вот еще нету 2 лет сыну, а дают ему дозы этого сильного лекарства, которые уже взрослым людям должны помочь, а ему никак не помогают. И я помню, было воскресенье, я звоню владыке, и владыка говорит, нет, ничего не будет. Ну, я так и передал матушке, и вот идет следующий день, понедельник, я хорошо помню, сейчас это был понедельник, так после обеда звонит владыка. Матушка моя была на работе, я был дома с 2 детьми, и звонит мне владыка и говорит, привози ребенка. Я тогда был в Монтерее, это 2 часа на юг от Сан-Франциско. Приезжаю я к вечеру в Сан-Франциско, и владыка мне сказал, отправляйся к отцу диакону, к отцу Алексею и жди. Уже поздно ночью, где-то, может быть, около часу ночи, ко мне приходит отец Алексей и говорит, бери ребенка и пошли. И я взял ребенка и пошел. Когда, значит, я вошел в усыпальницу, значит, все духовенство, которое собралось там, пропело ектенью о здравии. И когда пропели ектенью, тогда владыка Антоний мне сказал приложить ребенка к мощам святителя Иоанна. Я приложил ребенка к мощам, стали через неделю уменьшать дозы, и значит, показатели уже начали хорошо совершенно, показали, что почки пришли в свое нормальное состояние, и через приблизительно месяц уже совершенно убрали лекарства.
They decided to just go in and take it out. They didn't know what it was. And of course, we had him taken to St. John, and I went to communion, and the next day just went and did it. And I put my faith in him.
И мы за все благодарим Господа Бога и заступничество святителя Иоанна.
He always hears us and always intercedes in some way, whichever way it's supposed to work out.
Vladika was born in Malorossia, or what is known today as the Ukraine, in 1896. He came from a very prominent family, landed gentry, and his ancestors came from Serbia. They left Serbia during the Turkish yoke. The last name of the family was Maximovici, and one of the members of the family was a bishop in the Russian Church, Saint John Maximovici, the Metropolitan of Tobolsk and all Siberia. He was canonized in 1916. Vladika's sister Maria Lyubarskaya corresponded with my mother, and she once wrote that Vladika was a very obedient child, and the parents had no problems with his upbringing. He was an excellent pupil in school, a cadet, and he didn't like just two subjects, dancing and gym class. I was told that as a child, Vladika had toy soldiers that he played with, but he did not play military games. He played a monastery. In baptism, Vladika received the name of Michael. He received his education at the Poltava Military Corps, and after that he finished the Kharkiv University Law School. He was planning, apparently, a career in law, but the Russian Revolution forced the family to leave, and they ended up in Yugoslavia. Vladika entered the theological faculty of the University of Belgrade, which he completed. After graduation from the theological faculty, Vladika took the monastic vows, and he received the name of John in memory of his ancestor, Metropolitan John of Tobolsk and Siberia. Vladika knew Metropolitan Antony from Russia. He was a bishop in Kharkiv at one time, but he became closely associated and got to know Metropolitan Antony closer in Yugoslavia. And Metropolitan Antony was once asked, who spiritually you feel closest to? And he named just two people, Archimandrit Ambrosii, the abbot of Milkov Monastery, and then the young hieromonk John. After Vladika was ordained hieromonk, he was sent to the Bogoslovia in Bitel. Bogoslovia would be something similar to our seminary, where he taught. I visited Bitel in 1978 or 79 with a group of Serbian students, and the priests there still remembered their instructor, Otec Ioan.
Even in the time when St. John was in Belgrade as a young hieromonk, he was already, by people who knew him very well, recognized as being a very holy man. And when a certain Serbian bishop had been asked the question, do saints exist in our day? He said, go to Bitol, where hieromonk John was a teacher in the Serbian seminary, and go look at him and you will see a living saint.
It was from Bitel that Vladika was called to Belgrade and informed by Metropolitan Antony that he was elected to be Bishop of Shanghai.
The cathedral, I was born actually across the kitty corner from the cathedral, lived before the war 2 blocks from the cathedral, place called Verden Terrace that was almost any Russian that you talked to from Shanghai was either lived in Verden Terrace or somewhere near the cathedral. The main street by the cathedral was Paul Henry, small street, residential street, beautiful trees around it. And it was really, although it was the French concession, you saw Russians just all over.
Vladika knew my family from Shanghai. My parents met in Shanghai, were married there. My two older brothers were born in Shanghai. My twin brother and I, we were born in San Francisco. So I knew about Vladika from my childhood. When Vladika arrived in Shanghai, he noticed the many children, orphans or not, but who were homeless.
Vladika loved children. He started an orphanage called Tikhonozadonsky.
Altogether, almost 2,000 children had passed through the orphanage. Some for maybe just a few days or weeks, others for a few years, but on the whole, he himself told me almost 2,000 children.
When we were young, we used to think we saw a night ghost, as we saw a shadow moving in the dark. Only find out later that was our Bishop John checking on us. He wanted to check how every child was. He visited our rooms and blessed all of us with his hand cross. Bishop John also would inquire from our caregivers to see how everyone was. Our Saint John might have been short in stature, but to me, he did not give impression of being small. He was a swift walker. When he came into the room, he stood out, and everyone felt drawing toward him. He had a pleasant baritone voice with attentive, bright, kind look in his eyes. He had smiles for children and adults. He did not eat much, I remember, but his hands, I often wondered that they were not bony like you would have expected. His hands were nice and soft as we kissed him. The important one thing he installed in all his children was to learn early by heart, morning and evening and few other prayers, and still we are well into our old age, say our holy prayers to our heart, flowing easily with his blessing.
One day, it was Chinese New Year. It was snowing outside. I was fortunate. I was living in Archirevsky Dom. And I was going upstairs. I lived on 3rd floor. On the 2nd floor, Vladika Young opened the door. He says, "What will you be doing?" I said, "Nothing." He says, "You want to go with me to the Red Cross?" Because one of the boy from orphanage was found in the street and the Red Cross hospital. So Vladika and I, we went there, snowing, to the Red Cross, walking to его причастить, because he was sick.
Give him communion.
Give him the communion, yes.
Первый раз я встретил Владыки Яна, это было в Шанхае в 1934 году. У меня даже есть карточку, я хочу вам показать. Вот где я. Мне было 2 года.
Okay. Вот так наклоните чуть-чуть.
2 года мне. Это мой отец, конечно, это святой Ян. Вот я хочу про мою семью рассказать вам, как мы приняли православие в Шанхае, в Китае. Моя прабабушка Ирина приняла православие, также и мой дедушка Серафим, и мой отец Иона, и, конечно, мы все приняли православие. Папа был военный человек, и он боролся с японцами, когда во время оккупации, и боролся с коммунистами. японцы пришли в 1937 году в Шанхай. А когда его арестовали, положили в тюрьму, тогда владыка Иоанн меня принял в приют.
И в котором году это было?
Это было в 1943-1944 году. Когда война закончилась, в 1945-м я приехал обратно домой. А когда уже китайские коммунисты пришли, надо честь мой снова положил в приют.
At that time, everybody was scrambling to get out. We were lucky enough to go to Japan. My grandfather lived in Japan. He's a priest, was a priest. The others, with Bishop John, like about 5,000 went. Bishop John, had all the negotiations to allow that to happen, and about 5,000 people went to live in Tubabao, Philippines.
Там проходило время, когда тайфуны, и тогда все филиппинцы уходили с острова, а мы оставались. Сильные ливни, но таких сильных нет. Только как мы выехали до одного православного, там все перевернуло. Трубы, которые провели, все пропало. А пока мы были там, пока владыка благословлял, и филиппинцы сами говорили, что вот пока ваш ходит, вот этот монах, ходит и благословляет на все 4 стороны, все в порядке, все спокойно будет, да.
He promised that everybody would leave the Philippines, and he did fulfill his promise. Some people went to Australia, some people went to South America.
Vladika died July 2nd of 1966 in Seattle. He had left a few days earlier by car with Vladika Niktari, and I was supposed to go with him, but at the last minute I changed my mind because I decided I wanted to visit my brother, and to this day I regret that decision. On the way to Seattle, Vladika served liturgy in the homes where he stayed overnight, and he arrived in Seattle. He served liturgy that Saturday morning, and Отец Andrei Nakoniechny went with the icon to visit some of the Kursk icon to visit some of the parishioners, and Vladika had lunch with the widow of the former priest there, and was going to go to the cemetery. And two of the parishioners whom he had known earlier were waiting for him downstairs. He went upstairs to get his things, and they heard a fall. And something falling, something heavy falling. When they ran up, they saw Vladika trying to get up. Vladika had fallen, and he said that nothing of a kind has ever happened to him. They sat him down in his chair, and he was sitting there silently, and then he started grasping for air and passed away. Before leaving for Seattle, Vladika, in my presence, called the Russian newspaper in San Francisco, Russkaya Жизнь, and ordered an announcement in the paper that on June 24th, July 7th, is the feast of St. John the Baptist, the Nativity of St. John, and there would be a very festive service at the cathedral. That announcement was never printed because Vladika died, and all the announcements were about, the schedule of the services and his funeral. But I remember calling the office of the newspaper and saying that there will be a festive service on the Nativity of St. John.
I was one of those who was blessed to be a witness of the opening of the relics of our Holy Father among the Saints, John of Shanghai and San Francisco, in October of 1993.
When the sarcophagus was open for examination before the glorification of St. John, it took place in two parts. The first part was to examine that there were holy relics for veneration, and they were put into a new wooden casket. And the second time they were open, and then the holy relics were revested into the vestments that they're in now.
Before the archpastors arrived, the priests began to read the gospel over the relics of the saint. And when they did arrive, we served a full panihida, after which His Grace Archbishop Anthony blessed, at that time, Father Peter Lukianov, who is now, of course, His Grace Bishop Peter of Cleveland, to open the casket.
The original metal coffin had rusted through in some parts. We couldn't open the lid. We had to pry it open.
It was Father George Kurtov and myself who had actually discovered a way to kind of snap one of the hinges, which had also rusted through, and actually begin to open up the lid of the casket, at which point we notified the Archbishop of this, and he stopped everyone from what they were doing and had us all stand piously and wait that moment, and with his blessings we opened up the casket and discovered the incorrupt relics of the saint.
And the very moment of opening of the and examining of the remains is probably the most phenomenal moment of my life. Really, to see that for the first time.
Vladika, you could see that the body was dehydrated, and it was covered with I really don't know what, but a layer of some white, it was almost like dust. That was at the second opening that all this, the relics were washed, but otherwise they were intact, completely intact.
When we began to sort of work, if you will, on the relics, to clean off some of the rust and some of the material. We peeled it off from the relics. Archbishop Anthony then removed the air that was covering the face of the saint, and there he was, incorrupt and very recognizable. His hair, his beard, his fingernails, the blood vessels on his fingers were visible and noticeable. And as we began to sweep off rust and so forth from the various parts of the body, nothing fell apart. It was quite amazing. And with great piety and with a significant amount of trepidation, we approached this effort. Upon completion of the preparation of the relics, taking off all of the stuff that had fallen off of the casket and so forth, cleaning them up, Vladika Anthony had pulled out a clean one which had been prepared earlier. We removed the relics from the casket and put it into a temporary casket which Father George Kurtov had prepared beforehand. And we closed the casket, and Vladika Anthony sealed it, and we put it back into the sepulchre and closed it back up. We prayed again around the relics of the saints before we all departed, but it's impossible to really express the feelings that we all experienced. After we left the sepulchre that evening, none of us who were there could calm down, if you will. It was a feeling of such piety, of such blessedness, of such grace. What we had witnessed that evening is beyond description. Personally, it was a very important moment for me, as I was one of only 6 who were present that evening in 1993, who were present at the funeral services for Vladika John back in 1966. I was only a 12-year-old boy then, holding the staff of Archbishop Sava, and I recall late at night when they were about to close the casket and put it into the sepulchre, I didn't make it in time to venerate the relics one last time. And I stood there by the closed casket and I whispered a small prayer that God would grant to me to live to see the day where we would reopen this casket and that I might be there. And 28 years later, God granted the wish of his unworthy servant.
Also, we orphans would remember how some older people in church would call our Archbishop John, Bishop St. John. And we children wondered why they call him saint. In church, at the end of the service, he would tell us all these wonderful sermons, stories about the saints that celebrated that day. How we loved to hear him, as he could do it so vividly, all about each of them. He knew the year they lived, martyred, fell asleep. It all sounded like it happened yesterday.
It's a spiritual journey that a person goes on and continues through his life from probably from the earliest conscious acceptance of life according to God's commandments and really striving to fulfill those commandments, commandment of love of God and love of fellow man.
We, I think, who knew him in his life, knew he was a saint. How he would, for example, first of all, as I said, would pray. Then how he would care for people. How he would set up hospitals, how he would set up schools, how he would set up orphanages, how he brought the orphanage when it was absolutely impossible from the Tubabawa here.
To know him was to love him, and to love him is we still have to love him, and we need to pray to him to intercede for us. And he does intercede for us. Whether we know it or not, he does intercede for us.
The fact that he was very down to earth, I think this shows that you don't have to walk on water to be a saint. Just live the life of the church, believe in the church, do your prayers, confess your sins, have communion. I think just the opposite, that a person who's a human being, as we all are, a person with certain weaknesses, with certain maybe even minor faults, but a person just as us, that sanctity is achievable.